Next, a discussion about the evolving dangers toward journalists while reporting in domestic and foreign conflict zones. Diane Foley is the mother of late war journalist James Foley. She joined a panel that examined the importance of safety training for young journalists and countering online threats. From the National Press Club, this is just under an hour and 10 minutes.
Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Eileen O'Reilly, the president of the National Press Club and the managing editor of Standards and Training at Axios. This morning we have a special Headliners Newsmaker event featuring Diane Foley, the mother of journalist James Foley, who was murdered by ISIS in 2014. The Foley Foundation is announcing its new Journalist Safety Task Force, and we'll have a panel of experts discussing how to address these important issues. As we all know, unfortunately, this is in dire need now, as journalists remain in harm's way all around the world. The National Press Club is actively working with the Wall Street Journal to release the reporter Evan Gershkovich, who is being unjustly detained in a Russian prison. We continue to advocate for the release of Austin Tice, who's been held captive in Syria for more than 11 years. We have a hugely active press freedom team here that works tirelessly to promote the freedom of the press both here and abroad. Today, we are also brutally aware that over 11 journalists, and counting, I'm afraid, have already been killed or lost as casualties in the Israel-Hamas war over the past 9 days. We mourn the loss of each of these brave journalists. The James W. Foley Legacy Foundation works in helping journalists stay safe as they do their important work. The organization was founded by Diane Foley in September 2014, less than a month after Jim's public execution. I am a fellow alum of Jim from Marquette University. I graduated before Jim and did not have the pleasure of meeting him in person, but I had heard of him through our Marquette networks when he was first taken by Libya in 2011 and eventually released. The fact that he returned to the region so he could continue reporting on the stories that needed to be told, despite knowing directly the grave risks involved, to me is the embodiment of moral courage, which this foundation represents. The Foundation's supporters are committed to ensuring the freedom of Americans taken hostage overseas and that their safety and return is a priority for America. As part of that mission, the Foley Foundation works closely with the National Press Club to secure the release of our 2 American journalists held abroad. This week, Diane Foley, who is currently serving as the president of the foundation, was on national news stating that civilians and innocents were being used as pawns by Hamas, and expressed strong concern about the more than 150 hostages taken. Senator Chris Van Hollen, who serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, issued a statement yesterday thanking Diane Foley and saluting the foundation's work. Van Hollen says, quote, "Today, we remember not only James Foley, but also the risks journalists face when reporting from dangerous places to shine a light on the truth. The James Foley Foundation is a true leader in supporting this vital work, and it is in that spirit that I would especially like to thank Diane Foley and salute all of you for your commitment to that mission," end quote. We are honored Diane Foley is here today, and she will give her remarks in a minute. This will be followed by a panel moderated by Ellen Shearer, who is Professor Emerita of Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism and ran their Washington, D.C. Medill News Service. Ellen is also the chairperson of the Foley Foundation. We are also honored to have panelists here from the New York Times, the Voice of America, and a representative who has worked for years at the Marquette University Center for Peacekeeping. I wanted to thank Mike Smith, a reporter with Coastal Point and fellow board member on the National Press Club Board of Governors, for arranging today's newsmaker. I also wish to thank Lori Russo and Donna Laiwan Leger, who are the co-chairs of our headliner team. Special thanks to Cecily Scott Martin, our membership and events coordinator here at the club. And now I'd like us to give a warm welcome to Diane Foley.
Thank you, Eileen, and thanks to the National Press Club and all of you for taking time to be here, and for C-SPAN for covering our news today. The Foley Foundation is deeply committed to journalist safety. We want to ensure that both aspiring journalists and freelance journalists have access to the latest in safety education to enable them to bear witness to current events as safely as possible. Our signature initiatives have been the development of undergraduate and graduate school safety curricula to embed a safety curricula in all schools of journalism that's also accessible to freelance journalists. We currently have 20 journalism and communication schools who use our curriculum, thanks to our education director, Tom Durkin. And we also have 11 schools in Lebanon, thanks to our partnership with the Samir Kassir Foundation, who generously translated our curriculum into Arabic. We've partnered with Headset, a company that provides virtual reality safety training for freelancers and journalists. And we even had a session here at the National Press Club recently. As Eileen said, dangers to journalists seem to be increasing, both domestically and internationally. Many journalists have already been targeted in the Israeli-Hamas conflict. So we are delighted to welcome these generous experts who are willing to be part of a task force to help ensure that our curriculum is as timely, practical, and up-to-date as it can. I'd like to just introduce them. First of all, those who are not able to be with us, we have Professor Kathleen McElroy, who's the chair of journalism for the Moody College of Communication, University of Texas in Austin. Nathan Puffer, senior vice president of risk and resilience at Dow Jones. He was a veteran of the U.S. military and is now a fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And also Hannah Storm, founder and director of Headlines Network, who's been promoting a conversation about mental health and moral injury for journalists. And we're particularly delighted for those who can join us in person. We have Eric Phillips, program manager of Office of Language Programming for the Voice of America. He's responsible for journalist safety and is a primary liaison within the United States Agency for Global Media and all matters related to safety and security. Welcome, Eric. We also are so delighted to welcome Jason Wright, who came down from the New York Times. He's the Vice President of Corporate Security, spent a lot of years at BuzzFeed as their Global Security Director, and is a founding board member from the Culture of Safety Alliance for freelancers throughout the world. And Tom Durkin is here. He's our education director from Marquette University. And Ellen Shearer, our board chair, who was Jim's professor years ago and continues his legacy through our work today. We're so grateful for all of these experts and their willingness to so generously share so that our curriculum can be really useful, up to date, and most timely. Yesterday, we had the privilege of hosting the James Foley Freedom Run at Anacostia Park here in D.C., It was one of several runs that occurred throughout the country. We even had one in Paris this year, all to raise awareness about journalists like Evan and Austin, who still remain hostages, and just to raise awareness of the risk journalists take every day. As Eileen shared, Senator Van Hollen left remarks for us, and he said that he was inspired by our advocacy for press freedom. And he is right about the journalists' risks that they take just to bring us the news so that we might know what's happening across the world. So we hope that today's discussion will illuminate those risks and that we can help journalists stay safer. Thank you so much. Ellen?
Thank you, Diane. Let me add my thanks to the National Press Club for hosting this event today. It's so important to highlight the issue of and need for journalist safety education. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the National Press Club. This morning we'll be hearing from our task force members and Tom about the changing landscape of risks to journalists. But let me just briefly set the stage for the discussion. As both Diane and Eileen noted, journalists put themselves in harm's way to do the important job of getting the news to all of us. And journalists are sometimes deliberately targeted by governments, terrorists, criminals, and others. Of course, we're seeing this right now in Israel-Hamas conflict, as Eileen mentioned. The Committee to Protect Journalists says that as of the first 9 days of the fighting, almost a dozen journalists were killed, 2 were missing, and 8 injured. And the shelling last week in southern Lebanon killed a Reuters videographer and injured 6 other journalists. That's 13 journalists killed in those 2 regions in a week or so. Before last week, 16 journalists had been killed so far this year. Meanwhile, there's a different and increasing threat that foreign correspondents face: wrongful detentions by hostile governments, notably Russia, China, Iran, and Venezuela, according to the Foley Foundation research. But as we all know, it's not just conflict journalists and foreign correspondents who are at risk these days. Earlier this year, a TV reporter in Florida was shot to death while covering a homicide, and his videographer was injured. Last year, Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter Jeff German was stabbed multiple times and killed outside his home. Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellis was arrested in the murder. German had been investigating him. And during the Black Lives Matter protests, journalists were often injured, generally not by the protesters. In addition, many journalists around the country are targeted by online harassers. The list of risks goes on. The good news is that more and more news organizations, like those represented on our task force and others, are stepping up to the challenges posed by these risks. And nonprofits like CPJ, Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, the International Women's Media Foundation, and a Culture of Safety Alliance, to name a few, are providing resources for journalists to be prepared to assess risks, mitigate them with safety strategies, or determine when it's too dangerous. So with that background, let's get started. Tom, why don't you start off just kind of going into a little more detail about what the Foley Foundation curriculum aims to do?
Sure. Thank you for the question, and thank you to the Press Club for having us for this important panel. Within months of Jim's murder back in 2014, Ellen, who it was mentioned was one of Jim's professors, created a graduate-level seminar designed for conflict journalists, particularly for freelancers. And obviously that's important. We know that conflict journalists are going to come up against risks. But one of the things that we noticed and we started recognizing was that it's not just conflict journalists that need to be prepared for risk. And we have to start with journalists when they're young, to start building these habits, these safety habits, to make sure that journalists are learning how to be safe. The way I always think about this is I think about my sister Katie, who's a paramedic field chief with the Chicago Fire Department. Her job is to save lives, but she needs to know how to do it safely. Journalists are not that different than first responders. They run towards scenes. They run towards violence. They run towards places where other people are leaving, and they're armed with a pen or a camera. So we, I feel, have a responsibility to make sure journalists at the youngest age are learning how to be safe and how to build habits. So we took what Ellen had created with the graduate level seminar and started focusing on undergraduate programs. The challenge was, do you teach a class? If so, is it a first-year class? Do you wait till they're seniors? Or do you embed safety into the curriculum? And our thinking was that if we could gather materials, work with experts, see what students need to know, and we work with schools to start at the youngest, the first year. You walk in, how do you be safe? How do you do a risk assessment? How do you interview a hostile source? And these things are coming up throughout their courses. The habits are developing. And in that way, safety does not become some add-on. It's not something extra that you do. You need to be safe to be an effective journalist. And safety is not, it's not just the physical safety we're looking at. You're looking at physical safety, you're looking at mental safety, you're looking at digital safety. And while it seems like a lot to cover, if it's offered throughout courses, I think we have a better chance of making sure that journalists have the tools to protect themselves. And I firmly believe that the best way to do it is throughout the curriculum, where students are just learning this in their course. It's not like you need to be safe when you do this. You always need to be safe. To be honest, you can go to a school board meeting these days, and it can turn sideways. So doing risk assessments and thinking about your safety and what I can be prepared for it's a habit. And I know that the people on this stage agree with that and have either experienced or seen other journalists that need these tools to confront these challenges.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for all the work you've done over the years enhancing the curriculum. Eric, maybe you could talk a little bit about what keeps you up at night. What are the challenges? You have a network around the world and in the United States of journalists, freelancers, and staff that you have to try to protect. And how do you work with them to create a culture of safety, to keep them safe?
Thank you very much. In addition to myself being here, I also want to call attention to the fact that Clara Dominguez, who is a distinguished journalist herself and also manages all of the external partnerships for Voice of America, is also here with me today. So thank you, Clara. Beyond that, on behalf of all of our my colleagues at VOA, we want to extend our thanks to Diane, to you, Ellen, to Ben, and to you, Tom, for asking us to be part of this task force. We regard this opportunity very highly, and it's our hope that anything that we can contribute will be of use to the foundation as you guys continue to build on that already robust and impressive curriculum, for sure. We've been asked to talk about some of the challenges, and we'll do that. But before we get to the challenges, we want to touch on it's not all bad news. There are spots of good news, and I did want to share a couple with you here today. Of course, the Foley Foundation and their curriculum is the lead, goes without saying. But there's more good news. Amanda Bennett, who is the CEO of USAGM, has stated right from the start of her administration that journalist safety is a priority for USAGM and all of the entities that operate under USAGM, including Voice of America. That's a big deal. Words are wonderful, actions are better, and Amanda has created the first ever journalist safety officer position at USAGM. We're interviewing candidates for that position now, and when that appointment is made, that's somebody that I'll interact with on a daily basis in the interest of safety.
Could you tell a little bit more about that position, actually? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say it's probably below your pay. But the challenges are plenty, and they're only they're growing. They're growing in the nature of the challenges. They're growing in frequency, and at Voice of America, we have plenty of them. And I think the key is what Tom said. It's getting this conversation to be less of an extra box that you have to check, and more getting it to be habit. This is a thing that you have to be conscious of and be working on all the time as a journalist. A lot of talk about risk assessment. Risk assessment cannot just be a box that you check at the office before you go off to the location for your assignment. And it's something that we've been working on a lot at VOA in recent years. And the Foley Foundation curriculum touches on this, and it's pretty impressive. Risk assessment continues once you get to the location of your assignment. And we've got people in Israel now, as does the Times, and we've had to continually check in with our people to remind them, as you're moving around, do that assessment. Every public building in Israel is required by law to have a bomb shelter. Find the closest one to you. Know where it is at all times. Check all those boxes. It's absolutely an ongoing process. The smallest details make a difference. Best example I can give of that is about a year and a half ago, our correspondent in Juba, South Sudan, was called by her editor here in Washington to cover an anti-government protest in the city center in Juba. And she left her apartment in such a hurry, had all her gear, but forgot her VOA press ID. So she got to the city center. Officials began to round up all the journalists, as they do, and began to require proof of their affiliation, and she couldn't provide it. She was placed in prison for 10 days. 10 days in prison in South Sudan. Not a good time. Getting our journalists to accept something as simple as personal real-time tracking 24/7. Journalists love their privacy. Not everybody goes there easily. So we've had to finesse a lot of those conversations. Getting journalists, when the situation warrants, and it does quite frequently, to accept personal one-on-one security people with them. Journalists don't like to be encumbered by a +1 when they do their work. I get it. But there are some circumstances where you're going to have that person with you 24/7. And making those choices, if you're the newsroom manager and your curriculum touches on how important the management positions are, you have to find a security partner that understands their role is not to say no all the time in the field, but they understand the work that journalists do, and it's about having a conversation with that person. It's about having a security rep that says, look, the reporting you're suggesting is a little dicey. Let's have a conversation about the best way to attack this. Those people are hard to find, but we have to find them. Mental health, mental wellness, trauma, moral injury. This is sort of a new-ish conversation at VOA. We're being very careful about how we travel down that lane. We're absolutely engaged with Hannah Storm on that and the DART Center. But that's an ongoing conversation at VOA. One of the greatest areas of challenge that we're having at VOA is with the use of our stringers and our freelance network. And in the universe of VOA, those are two distinctly different models. A stringer typically is a person who has a direct contract with us. So if that person gets into trouble, there's sort of an expectation that we're going to step up and help. Increasingly, we're using freelancers from platforms like Paydesk and Story Hunter. There's no direct affiliation between VOA or the agency and the individual. Right? That connection is with the company, Paydesk and Story Hunter. So what is our responsibility to the journalist if the journalist gets in trouble? At the ACOS meetings in New York, there was a great discussion on policy versus principle. Policy says you're not responsible for that person. Principle says, wait, what? This person is working in a hostile environment, completing assignments for me on a daily basis. How am I not responsible for that person? That's a very tricky conversation at VOA, very difficult conversation in a federal environment, and we're working on it. We know that we have to do better. I could go on. There were plenty of challenges to talk about, but I'll just close by repeating my thanks to the Foley Foundation on behalf of VOA to be a part of this. And again, we hope that whatever we can contribute will be useful. Thank you.
I'm sure it will, and we really appreciate your help. So, Jason, I'm going to ask you a variation of the same question. What keeps you up at night? And how has that changed also over time? You know, I think to Eric's point, you can't be static in your approach.
No, you
so
certainly can't.
Maybe talk a little bit about how it's evolved and what you're worried about today.
I mean, if you're going to get a couple of security people here, I think that there was an expectation that there would be doom and gloom, but I'm going to follow Eric's lead and maybe if you'll allow me, to be a little optimistic for just a second.
It's allowed.
I actually feel, similar to what you had mentioned, Eric, and it was really well said, that there has been a pretty substantial shift in the past 10 years, I think, in the relationship of risk between editors and reporters, specifically freelancers, and I think it's for the better. I could speak for New York, and actually, if I could, I'd be curious to hear what your point of view is and what your point of view is, and if you see the same thing. But what I've seen through my work at ACOS, through my work at the Times, is that the stereotype or the cliche of this grizzled, angry editor being like, get out there, get me that story, don't bother me, and don't ask questions until you've got the photos on my desk. I think that that's going by the wayside, and that's a great thing. Nowadays, we see that we have young reporters and young freelancers who are concerned about security, and they raise these issues. And what we've been trying to do is make sure that these young reporters, these student reporters, freelancers, recognize that in the modern newsroom, an editor sees security consciousness as an asset and not a liability, right? So if there's a young reporter who's asking difficult questions and saying, okay, I'm going to go to South Sudan and get this tough story, and I'm going to be out there in the protest, but what are you going to do? What's your plan for me? What's the plan if I get in trouble? What's the plan? What's our communications plan? How are we checking in? I want those reporters to see. I can assure you that at the New York Times, if you raise your hand and ask those kinds of questions, editors will see that as an asset. We say, oh, great, this looks like a reliable person that we can feel comfortable commissioning difficult stories on. And the older concept of what I think they would refer to as the cowboy, the reporter kind of that just dashes from war zone to war zone and from danger to danger without too much of a second thought, actually creates a mountain of both ethical challenges, but of course legal challenges for our organizations as well. So I really do think in the past 10 years that I've seen this shift, and it's great. What keeps me up at night, and really this is, I think, a problem at any institution, small and big, is how do you translate that message into something operational, right? So we know we all want to do the right thing. It's not that easy, okay? The editors, senior leadership, everyone's aligned that says that journalism safety is a priority, but it's why I asked specifically about this new role that it seems is being stood up. That's a great step because operationalizing these thoughts is really challenging, and I'll be the first to admit that at the Times with our resources it's still tough. We're still figuring it out as we do it, specifically around, as you mentioned, the intersection of mental health challenges with the news cycle that we're on today. I think we're all figuring it out as we go through it, but developing plans and policies that can operationalize these ideas, because we all are aligned on these principles. We all want to make sure that news gathering is done safely. Let's just figure out how to do it. And I think that's what I'm really spending time trying to think of how to solve.
I want to follow up on that, but I just want to remind people that if you have questions, there are pieces of paper and you can write your questions. So we'll be getting to those shortly. Jason, back to what's keeping you up at night. I don't think either of you mentioned digital safety too much. Could we talk about that? Because that's, in a way, almost a hidden danger. You can be attacked without leaving your desk.
That's true. It's offered our adversaries greatly enhanced capabilities to be able to interfere with our news gathering. I want to make a note to, it's been mentioned, the impact of online harassment as well.
Yes.
And forgive me for using a little bit of military jargon, but there's a term, a force multiplier, which is where somebody on their own, not requiring the resources of a government. We spend a lot of effort talking about nation states and advanced malware, right? Powerful tools like Pegasus and other things like that. And those are a threat, don't get me wrong. But individuals at home who are firing off awful messages to people can have a silencing effect as well. And that's really what the threat is that we're describing, right? It's the threat of reporters not wanting to continue to cover something because they feel like, well, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth the wave of harassment I'm going to get. What we've found is that digital security is intimidating to people. It's very technical. There's a lot of things you can get wrong. But I certainly believe, and I think that the curriculum and curriculums that are geared towards solving this issue, if they're focused on principles, the principles of digital security, those don't change, broadly speaking. The techniques, the specifics, the technology, that's constantly shifting. And so making sure that folks understand the core principles of information security really are, I wouldn't say static, but they're not shifting quite as fast as the technologies on top of them are. And that's a good way to ensure that people have a strong foundation, and then on their own they can kind of fill in the blanks of what is needed in a given moment.
I mean, that's a very, very well said. There's not too much I can add to that, but I'll touch on it a little bit. There are two lanes for digital security. The one that's most obvious is with your personal devices, and we've had to tell our people, use an agency device. Don't use your personal device when you're traveling. You don't want your personal self to be exposed to the bad actors out there. The more dangerous, though, speaks to your question, Ellen, is the harassment piece. And at VOA, it happens with tremendous frequency. And what's happening more than the individual journalists being harassed and attacked is very worrisome, is the members of their family. Mm-hmm. The bad actors are finding these family connections. And now when the journalist logs on, they're getting these threatening correspondence with the names of their family members and the actions that are being taken against them, and that's very worrisome. And then when that happens, we engage with the journalist and maybe take them offline for a period of time. The reaction to that can be any number of things, and it goes without saying, the last thing that a journalist wants to have happen is to be taken offline for a while. So maybe that person does their work without a byline for a bit, doesn't go on travel for a bit. There are a number of steps that can take, but it's a really significant issue at VOA.
And are there any specific? Is it? I suppose it's very much case by case.
Yes,
yeah.
It's very much case by case the way we react to it. Yeah.
Can I add actually?
Yes.
I feel like whenever I'm at events like this, I always want people to be able to feel like they can leave with a specific or practical piece to this. One of the challenges that we had confronted specifically on this issue with the harassment of reporters, of their families, et cetera, is it's really a cross-functional problem or an interdisciplinary problem. You've got a security component, but it also sometimes speaks, depending on your organization, it speaks to different teams. There's an information security team, there might be a physical security team. There is a communications issue, right? There's legal questions that are raised, and then oftentimes there's standards questions that are raised. And so our approach has been to try and create as many cross-functional groups as possible, or essentially in this case, one cross-functional group that has representation from the different departments that I'd said. And again, I think this applies to any sized organization. Mm-hmm. Whoever wears the hat. And there's an elegance, I think, to VOA's approach here. The fact that you're here and that you have these responsibilities, I think, streamlines a lot of that, right? Because, and so we've tried to mimic or duplicate some of that effort, which is to say that we have our communications professionals who can handle some of the communications challenges that you're having. We have the information security and the security professionals making sure that everyone's safe. If there's standards questions that are baked into this, mm-hmm. we're making sure that those are addressed. And then, of course, there's the leadership component which you also touched on. I think that I absolutely endorse that approach, which is that senior leadership needs to know that it's a problem and needs to know it's something that's taken seriously, and that oftentimes it's as simple as just having a senior leader reach out to this individual and say, hey, I know what you're going through, and that's the cost of good journalism, or whatever it may be. But that's a good example of operationalizing these kinds of things and saying, here's the playbook, that's what you need to do.
If I can just circle back, if you start thinking about the safety curriculum, one of the things I think we really need to get past is this idea that student journalists are journalists in training. Right. They are journalists. They are covering the local news for most communities. They are covering violence. They're covering sexual assaults. They are covering real stories. They're not in training. If you look at some of the biggest breaking stories domestically, if you think about places like Northwestern, Michigan State, Stanford, school shootings in University of North Carolina, these are real stories that have real impact that can really affect young journalists. And I think J schools, both faculty and students, need to realize that these are young working journalists and need to be prepared for what they're covering.
I agree. I think that, and thanks for the shout out to Northwestern, but I do think that gets back to this whole idea of these cannot be standalone. Let's before you go out on assignment, do a risk assessment. Okay, you're good to go. You really have to be having this in your head as wherever I am, thinking about, am I safe here, and what can I do about it? Diane.
The only thing I would add, because I think that's so true, and I think I totally agree with what Jason's saying. I think I'm beginning to see it evolve but some schools of journalism and even editors previously didn't seem to have any moral responsibility for sending people out wherever, sending their students out into the most dangerous neighborhoods, often alone. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them realize their responsibility to empower these students, give them the tools they need, the freelancers, the journalists, so that they know someone's got their back and they can be safe. They have a plan. They know how to stay safe when they're covering these stories.
Yes. And I think that also brings up the issue of this isn't just an issue for foreign correspondents. This is an issue for reporters in the United States. And I wonder if you two could talk about how you address, or if, problems that have come up in terms of, protests, civil unrest that has become violent. Certainly in Washington, we went through an insurrection. So, I think we've seen this more and more. And in fact, Tom and I have talked to some news organizations around the country, and their reporters were talking about some of the basic ways that we used to report stories. If there's a murder in a community, as what happened in Florida, you go to the family's home, the victim's home. That's reporters are concerned about knocking on someone's door because of all of the gun violence. I'm not trying to be political, just factual. Or, even pulling into someone's driveway, people have got hurt. So I just wonder, how do you talk to your newsrooms about stories they're covering in the United States? And how does that change versus, or not change, compared with foreign correspondence?
Well, I'll jump in. We're going to repeat mindset and habit a lot here today, and that's fine. When you join VOA as a brand new staff person or as a brand new contractor, you're required to go through standard orientation. And I do a 30 or 40 minute presentation on journalist safety, and we hit on this point right up front, that anywhere you go, including our backyard at the Voice of America, which is the National Mall, as you noted, is frequently the site for marches, rallies, protests. And people have to understand that those events can turn hostile. When emotions are high, tensions are high, you always run the risk for those events to get a little sideways, and it becomes a dangerous environment for a journalist. But the trickier part of that is it's not just the event. I think if you're a journalist, you just have to understand that the universe has become a hostile environment for you in the past couple of years. It doesn't make any difference where the assignment is. But for people who are just doing assignments in the Washington area particularly, you know, we have them report to me and to their supervisor where they're going to be. We require that they go in pairs now, that they don't do those assignments alone, and make sure that real-time location tracking is part of the plan. So it's just having that mindset that when you walk out of the door of the building at VOA, you're walking into a hostile environment. It just doesn't make any difference what the assignment is anymore.
Wow. Yeah, you know, and I think I'll have a slightly different answer, perhaps. And one of I'm going to borrow from materials that actually we use when we're training our own teams. We have a whole slide that says war is straightforward, right? And broadly speaking, if a reporter is going to go out to war, in most cases, they recognize and they understand that there's going to be a security burden on them, and you know, you're going to have PPE, and you're going to have this, and we're going to be checking in with you all the time. I'd like to reference, you know, if we're describing some tragedies, really a very formative tragedy that helped shape the way myself and other professionals I've worked with think about risk was the murder of Kim Wall, the journalist, by a eccentric submarine inventor a few years back. And, you know, if you were to take if you were to, before that assignment, take a look at it from a 30,000-foot view and be like, sounds like a quirky story that, you know, someone's going to go interview this strange submarine inventor about what's going on, and I probably wouldn't have before. If you would have asked me, I wouldn't have thought twice about it and been like, yeah, go have fun. What the challenge is, and what's really difficult, and you speak to this a little bit, but the line that we're trying to weave is that if you're going to do a story like that, or if you're going to go to the mall, or if you're going to door knock somewhere, it's not appropriate for us to put you through like a 4-day-long HEFAT course just for this one thing, give you body armor, PPE, and a satellite tracker. Like, we have to be flexible. And because my fear, what keeps me up at night, is the feeling that a reporter will say, I don't really want to reach out to them, because if I reach out to them, they're going to make me go through like this whole thing, and it's not necessary. And then we get nowhere. And so what we're trying to find is how to get that light touch so that there is accountability and there is security. It's not going to look like what we have in Ukraine, because it doesn't need to be that, but we need something. And something as simple and straightforward as you're going to door knock, someone should know where you are and should be, you know, checking in. Or, again, if we want to talk about journalism students, and this is one that I think is it's a hard one, and I don't think there's easy answers. How many young female students are having meetings with sources in a bar where nobody knows where they are, you know, by themselves? And is there some sort of accountability that we're putting in place? And it could be as simple as what you described, right? Well, how about you just send me a text message that lets me know when you're there and when to expect you back? And then I should emphasize, because I say this whenever I talk about check-ins, the person at the other end receiving needs to know what to do if it doesn't arrive, but, you know, that there's some sort of a plan in place. But really, when we're thinking about the domestic environment, we're running on two tracks, because you have the track that says, what operationally are we doing, the nuts and bolts? How do we do a light touch so we don't freak people out? Because let's be clear, this isn't the same risk as it would be in an active war zone. However, big picture, for the senior leadership to think about, like, how are things changing here? Right? And how is the environment changing here? How do police interact with the press these days? How does the government interact with the press? And how does the public interact with the press? And those are tough questions that I think should be informing the future policies that we begin to put forward.
But I do think you make a good point that when you are going into a conflict area, you know it's probably, you know, there is a risk. But the risks are unexpected. You know, the Florida TV reporter was doing a routine story. And so I think that's, in a way, a lot more tricky, because to your point about the light touch, and, you know, I do think it's not a bad thought to say, when you go out in the United States, you're facing a hostile environment. but it possibly more for the actors that you're dealing with. But it's more complicated in a way because it's not as obvious. It's not place specific. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things we talk about with our curriculum, for instance, is that we're not trying to teach safety to scare journalists. It's to empower. Like, I've thought about this. I've thought about things that could go wrong. And so if something that is tricky happens, you're like, okay, you might not be 100% prepared for it, but you've thought about, like, what could possibly go wrong with this, as opposed to it happening without even thinking this could possibly happen. I mean,
Right.
I always think back, like, you think about, like, the Boston Marathon. Like, who could have possibly known something like that was going to happen? But now that we know these things happen, what would I do if it did? What if something like that in Las Vegas with the shooting at the concert a few years back? Like, I think it can be empowering to know that I've at least thought through what potentially could go wrong, as opposed to, like, just being blindsided by it.
We've talked a lot about what your organizations are doing, which is, so great to hear because of how seriously you're treating this issue. And I know many organizations, other news organizations, are doing the same thing. And as Tom said, I think journalism schools are trying to empower students more than, a decade ago. But how about, there are many struggling news organizations, or maybe both financially or maybe in terms of their commitment to safety. Does this take deep pockets, or can this be done without deep pockets? Diane.
That's partly what one of the values, I think, of the curriculum. I mean, ultimately, the journalist has to take responsibility. I mean, the journalist has to recognize that they are responsible to educate themselves, to become expert at digital security, at keeping themselves safe and their sources safe. So, because it's not possible, and for every tiny organization to have everything in place, like the mighty VOA and New York Times. I mean, you folks are the gold standard, and we need you for that, because we need to aspire to that. But you're right, Ellen. I think a lot of the smaller newsrooms or whatever around the world may not have that. And so the journalists themselves, and we saw a lot of that at ACOS, the gathering of freelancers last week in New York, that they're struggling to empower themselves and make sure their colleagues can be as strong within their own little area to keep themselves safe. It's not easy.
And I don't mean to imply that it's easy for you either.
No,
I'm just saying,
easy.
when news organizations are, local news organizations reducing staffs and stuff, I think the hopeful thing is we've had a number of smaller news organizations reach out to us, ask for advice. But it's, it is also a challenge, I think, like to say, yes, of course this is important. And how are we going to do it?
Well, every top line, every dollar you spend toward journalist safety is a dollar well spent. And we go uncomfortably into the area of budgets and funding when the conversation is journalist safety. Got it. But a little bit of context in the VOA reality. Helmet, vest, gas mask, about $3,000. In the South and Central Asia division alone, there are 106 stringers. We have 6 language divisions. So do that math. Again, no one's questioning the value. No one's questioning whether it's worth it. But the number is always going to draw a conversation because of what it requires for the managers, and how we have to rearrange budgets and funds to make sure that gear gets out. So it's absolutely part of the conversation for an organization my size. So for an organization of a much smaller size, to fund this stuff is significant.
We have a few questions from the audience here. And remember, there are cards there, so I hope we'll get some more questions. What is your plan for me? Eric says these conversations now happen up front and on the ground. And the questioner is asking, is there a specific example or scenario you could cite about, like, what does that look like in a real life example?
What does the conversation with the journalist look like?
Yeah.
So it's shocker, VOA is a federal organization, so there's a lot of policy and procedure involved. Everyone's stunned to hear that. We have a very cooperative and collaborative relationship with the agency, USAGM, the director of security there, and his people. So the first thing that is entailed, and I'll try not to go on too long here, but if you're a reporter that is, and before we even get to that point, there is a protocol at VOA for requesting an assignment in a hostile environment. You got to get your managing editor on board. You have to get your service chief on board. You have to get your division director on board. Then it kicks up to the VOA director to sign off on. And if everybody says yes, then you move on to a formal security briefing. The security officers at USAGM perform that briefing. They're in contact with the embassies and consulates all around the world. So we're getting good data from regional security officers at all of those locations. And all of that is relayed to the journalist. And those sessions can go on and on and on. Christina, you've been through one of those. Some of those sessions can be 90 minutes or 2 hours in length. There's just a lot of information to share. So in addition to the conversation about PPE and doing risk assessment, there's a lot of conversation about real threats to the journalist, where you're going, about what you can expect based on what's happened in the past, and then all of that information from our external players is all shared with the journalist. And it's not a very light touch at all. That's a very heavy-handed approach, but we feel like for assignments in dicey places, that's the way it's got to be. And
since you used an acronym, PPE is personal protective equipment.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Jason, could you give us like a real life scenario? When you're sending a reporter to Israel, say, or
let me give one that's not like currently operationally
good idea.
in use. But would you like an example of what we would term a quote unquote high risk deployment type example? I mean, in those cases, we're heavier touch too, right? You're describing a risk assessment. There's a written component. The important part in all of these processes is making sure that the right questions are asked. We're not necessarily gunning for an answer. We're gunning for, well, did we kind of surface issues that maybe are unforeseen? The next important piece, which I really want to stress, is that it is not up to the security team as to whether or not an assignment is going to go forward, right? Because that's an editorial decision, right? My job would be very easy if I just said no to everything. So there's obviously a reason why we're putting people into harm's way, and I am not the editor, so it's not my decision to make that. So really, our function is to try and elevate. Did you think about this? Did you think about these risks? How are we going to mitigate these risks? You can't mitigate every risk, so there's going to be the latent risks. How are we going to decide, is the story worth these kinds of risks? I think what you'll find, the areas that are the most challenging, where you have the most unknowns, it's almost always when communication is an issue, right? Whether it's because of the geography of an assignment, that there just won't be communication, or because of the political or whatever the reason. And that means, in those cases, it's actually much more incumbent on the reporter to demonstrate their own capabilities, and that's where the experience comes in. And to be clear, we're not an agnostic institution that will just take anyone and be like, okay, you go here, you go here. For these really difficult assignments, of course, there's a consideration of the reporter's own capabilities and experience. And I should say, even more to that point, we cannot be experts on every single region and every single place in the world. So in fact, I would go so far as to say, oftentimes we're learning from them and saying, okay, help us understand, right? What are the risks in this specific area? You know best, you're the bureau chief, right? We'll talk through the specifics of it, but you're going to surface for us like what the problems are. And then leadership, editorial leadership, is going to make the call.
And is there a time where, okay, this reporter isn't the right, can't go, but this reporter can, based on
I don't think
their knowledge or physical
I don't think
skills?
it would be that. To be clear, it's this isn't something that's written in stone, but rather I would look at it the other way, which is that if there's the reporters or the editors are usually the ones that are coming up, right, with a given idea or a story that they're going to do. A seasoned reporter is going to come forward with a really robust risk assessment, and if there's somebody who's junior and they're not very comfortable in it, that will be reflected in the risk assessment that comes forward, and then we might say, well, we need to do a little bit more work here. There needs to be a more meaty conversation, and if we don't feel like we're able to have that kind of a conversation, then it might not be the right fit. But it's not like we're kind of playing this game of training baseball players around the field, but rather thinking just that people who have a lot of experience usually tend to put together better risk assessments. And then, to be clear, when you work in an institution like ours, there's a lot of great opportunities, and people move between desks all the time, and so there's ample ability for younger reporters to get exposure to the process and to the assessments, before they might do something particularly more hazardous.
Yeah, Jason has mentioned appropriately the reporter's experience on a number of occasions, and it's absolutely something that we take into consideration at VOA. And Israel is a very good example of this. We have a lot of reporters who have expressed interest in going, understandably. And the first two questions that we're asking is, let's have a conversation about your previous coverage in a war zone. And then, are you HEAT certified? HEAT certified, what is HEAT? HEAT is a training program. It's hostile environment awareness training. There are a couple of varieties of that. There's one course that provides you a sort of basic survival and first aid. Then there's HEAT training that actually has a conflict zone component. And for this conversation, we're actually requiring the latter. The experience is taken into consideration. We don't ever want to be in a position where we're saying to a journalist, no, you can't go. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's make sure you're the right person, and let's make sure you're equipped with experience and training that'll keep risk assessment and safety top of mind.
Another audience member asks, and Jason, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but amid all the challenges facing journalists today, what gives you hope?
I opened with it, so I could say, past that, I'll give another version of it. There are so many tools and resources, and they're right in front of your face, and they oftentimes don't require a lot of work. And I remember, I'll use a little bit of a digital security example if I may, but I think it's sort of a helpful one. I don't know if anyone here has ever tried to set up a PGP mail account, which is a type of encryption for email where you have to teach people, okay, well, this is what's called your public key, and this is your private key, and the public key you give to people, the private key you keep secret. They can't see your private key, but they should see your public key. And it's like, if anyone's tried to go through and teach this to somebody, it's like, oh my God, are you killing me? You're pulling your hair out. 2-hour-long training to get this done.
On the learning end, it's no funny.
Yeah, right. Well put. Nowadays, WhatsApp, Signal, these tools provide the same level of this incredible end-to-end encryption, and you don't have to think about it. And kids in high school are using it, right? It's not a thing that needs training at all. You say, hey, download Signal, and there we go. Another point that I'll make, which is that at no time is it better to be the owner of the most popular mobile devices. So like the Apple and the Androids that everyone's carrying around, these companies are investing enormously in the security of their devices. And so it used to be, it remains a major threat vector, mobile security, but a new, up-to-date iPhone is incredibly secure. It's an incredibly secure device. And so when we're thinking about how to make sure that people are safe, we're not thinking about we're spending a lot less time thinking about, well, you're going to need a burner device and a passphrase, and you have to install this special tool on your computer. That it's like, look, if you just keep your computer up to date, your phone up to date, and you use an encrypted messaging service like Signal, you're probably 95% of the way there. And there are a group of reporters for which that 5% or maybe even 1%, where the level of threat is so significant that you're going to need a little bit extra. But I feel confident to say that most reporters doing their jobs today will be incredibly difficult to interfere or hack them if they do the three things that I just mentioned. So I think that wasn't the case 20 years ago, and so we're really in a golden age of capability there with tools.
So don't hit remind me later. Go ahead and do the update.
Do that update. Do the update as soon as you can.
I would say that if you want hope, and this is not a safety issue, I would say go talk to young journalists in journalism schools and the passion they have, despite the risks. It's remarkable to talk to young journalists or aspiring journalists and just how excited they are to go tell stories. And so I think if we can combine it with these safety elements, I think we can be in a really good position.
Yeah, I would say, I'm sorry.
No.
I would, everything he said, first of all, is spot on. And I'll just add to that with a baseline at VOA. I've been at VOA for 20 years. The conversation on safety is happening with much, much greater frequency now than it ever has. That gives me hope. The manner in which our leaders at VOA and USAGM are taking this issue up and being responsive to it, it's much more frequent now than it ever has been. So that gives me hope. So it's just having that conversation. It happens now across all 6 language divisions at VOA every single day on some level. That gives me hope.
And do you guys see the results of that? I mean, I think you were alluding to this earlier, but do you see journalism students, young reporters feeling like it's okay to bring this up or to say, I'm not comfortable going on that assignment?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Not enough. I mean, that's why I'm here saying what I'm saying, and I want to just stress that I think we both agree our job is to make more journalism, right? And so all of this should be in the service of people feeling more comfortable to go out and report. I want journalists to recognize that just because you're asking questions about risk and safety doesn't mean that your story is going to get booted or anything. Like, it just means you have to have the conversation, and it's just going to mean putting in a little bit more work. But we want the story to get out, and I just wish that more young people recognize that it's not going to prevent it.
So the younger journalists that Foley is dealing with, as part of that boring, long-winded journalist safety bit that I do as part of our onboarding, we interact there with a lot of really young journalists coming to us as staff and as contractors. And most of them are coming to VOA from other news organizations. And I always try to make sure that that's less of me barking out at them and much more of a two-way conversation. And I always say as part of that, just that. So you guys are coming to us from other places. You've experienced things with regard to safety, policies, procedures that maybe we don't have at VOA. Please contribute that to the conversation. And they always do. So that's really a very strong point, that the younger journalists are interested in this part of the conversation and they're anxious to contribute.
We've, again, Tom and I, in talking to journalism schools, but also newsrooms, the good sign is the managers created a meeting place where the staff could talk about their safety concerns, and that's definitely really positive. But we also were seeing journalists of all experience levels being quite open about the environment has changed. Here are some of the things we're facing that we just never thought we'd have to face before. So, to kind of the point of, is the environment changing? I do think that you're right. I think there is a change in the way managers are looking at safety and the way journalists are looking at safety, and not being afraid to talk about it is a big step forward. Oh.
It's about harassment.
Thank you.
Can you read my?
Yes. Online harassment is becoming increasingly a problem. Should there be a response?
From the state.
From the government, from the state.
In terms of legislation.
With
Legislation.
Oh, should there be legislation about online harassment?
Interesting question. Probably not a lane that I would go down in this environment. I can't speak for the State Department or any other part of the government about whether or not there should be or they have an interest in getting involved in this conversation. My answer is a cop-out. I'm sorry. It's just not a lane that is maybe appropriate for today's conversation.
Mm-hmm. But I do think it's a good question because I certainly agree with you, Eric, because, you know, like in the European Union, for example, I mean, they're really working with social media companies and everything to try to make them safer, if you will, for people. And I think as a country, we're a little slow to the table on that. You know, here we've developed all these wonderful platforms and everything, but we're slow to kind of require them to deliver in terms of safety for people, for our children, So, I really, recently, Bill Holstein recently did a book about cyber war about Russia and China. It was really frightening, that a lot of our freedoms almost make us more vulnerable. That we really got to think about protecting ourselves. It's like a new age. Like the cyber war is just kind of out there. And we're going to be naive if we, as a country, don't do anything about that. So I think it's something we need to think about for sure.
Thank you, Diane. We have to end. We're going to get the hook any minute. But I want to thank our new task force members and those who could not join us, but thanks. We're so looking forward to your guidance. You can see that we think our curriculum is going to be even better with their great advice. And I think also, I hope we all keep safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
C-SPAN's Washington